My name is Audrey, I'm 32 years old, and my own parents kicked me out of their house the day I announced my pregnancy, just weeks after throwing my sister a party worth thousands for hers. Before I tell you how I uncovered a secret that blew my entire family apart, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The scent of my mom's pot roast usually meant comfort, but that Sunday, it just made my stomach churn with nerves. I sat at the familiar oak dining table in my parents' Ohio home, my hand resting protectively on my belly. In my lap, hidden under a cloth napkin, was a small, neatly wrapped gift box. Inside was a tiny white onesie with the words "World's Best Grandparents" printed across the chest. My husband, Calvin, sat beside me, his leg gently nudging mine under the table, a silent gesture of support. Just a month earlier, the same room had been buzzing with excitement. My older sister, Beatrice, the family's golden child, had announced she was pregnant. You would have thought she'd announced she'd won the lottery. My mother had burst into tears of pure joy. My father had declared it the best day of his life. The very next week, they threw her a lavish baby shower with a catered lunch and over 100 guests. They bought her a top-of-the-line stroller that cost more than my first car and, to top it all off, they gifted her and her husband, Trevor, an all-expenses-paid baby moon trip to Florida. Every expecting mother deserves to be pampered, my father had said, his voice thick with pride. I wasn't naive. I knew my announcement wouldn't get the same fanfare. It never did. B was the responsible one, the successful one. I was the dramatic one, the one who supposedly craved attention. But this was different. This was their grandchild. A new life. Surely, that would be enough to earn me a little of that joy, a fraction of that excitement. So when dinner was over and the plates were cleared, I took a deep breath. Calvin and I have some wonderful news to share, I began, my voice a little shaky. I stood up and handed the box to my mother. She took it with a confused look, her perfectly manicured fingers fumbling with the ribbon. She pulled out the onesie and stared at it, her brow furrowed. The room fell silent. I watched her face, waiting for the smile, for the tears, for anything. Instead, a look that I can only describe as annoyance flashed across her face. She let out a long, heavy sigh and tossed the onesie onto the table like it was a used napkin. Oh, great, she said, her voice flat. Another one. The words hit me like a physical slap. All the air rushed out of my lungs. I looked around the table, desperate. Calvin's hand found mine, his grip like iron. My father just shook his head, a look of disappointment on his face. Really, Audrey? Right now, he said. Couldn't you have waited? Beatrice needs our focus. I stood there, frozen, my carefully planned announcement turning to ash in my mouth. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This wasn't right. Then Beatrice, who had been watching the whole scene with a smug little smile, leaned forward. She looked right at me, her eyes glinting with a cruelty I knew all too well. She probably just got pregnant for the gifts, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. And then, the worst part. They laughed. My father let out a short, sharp chuckle. My mother covered her mouth, but her shoulders were shaking. Even Trevor, B.A.'s husband, cracked a smile. They were all laughing. At me. At the idea that I would bring a child into this world just to get a piece of what my sister had been handed her whole life. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. The laughter was a physical thing, a suffocating weight in the room. I could feel the tears welling up, hot and sharp, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. That's when Calvin stood up. He's a calm man, my husband, but in that moment, his face was red with a rage I had never seen before. So nothing for our child, he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. This is your daughter. This is her first baby. And this is how you react? My mother's eyes flashed. Excuse me, she snapped, her voice turning to ice. Do not make any drama in this house. This is our house. If you don't like it, you can get out. The words hung in the air, an undeniable command. Get out. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat was closed tight. I turned and walked toward the door, Calvin right behind me. As we left, I could hear my mother call after us, "Don't be so dramatic, Audrey." The car ride home was completely silent, except for the sound of my muffled sobs. Calvin just drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When we finally got inside our small apartment, I collapsed onto the sofa, and all the years of feeling second best, of being overlooked and dismissed, came pouring out in a flood of tears. Calvin held me, whispering, "I'm so sorry, Audrey." That was unforgivable. That night, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just the hurt anymore. It was something colder, harder. They hadn't just dismissed me. They had dismissed our child. Our baby. And that was a line I never knew existed, but now that they had crossed it, I knew there was no going back. The next morning, I woke up with my eyes swollen shut, my body aching with a grief so deep it felt like a part of me had died. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. And again. And again. My vision was blurry as I picked it up. 24 missed calls. All from my parents. A single text message glowed on the screen, the words stark in all caps, "Emergency. Call US now." My blood ran cold. My first thought was Beatrice. The baby. Something terrible must have happened. All the anger from the night before evaporated, replaced by a surge of pure panic. With a trembling hand, I pressed the call button, my heart pounding in my chest as the phone began to ring on the other end. To understand the chill in that room, the way their laughter could feel like a physical blow, you have to understand the 32 years of kindling they'd been stacking up. My entire life, I had been living in the shadow of a brilliant, blazing star named Beatrice, and my parents were her devoted astronomers, charting her every move with adoration. I was a different celestial body entirely, a distant, quiet moon they only seemed to notice when I drifted into their line of sight and blocked the view of their sun. It started in the quiet, insidious ways you don't even have the words for as a child. Our childhood home had 2 bedrooms upstairs. Beatrice's was a sun-drenched sanctuary at the front of the house, with a large bay window where she could sit and read, overlooking my mother's prized rose garden. Mine was at the back of the house, a small, boxy room with a single window that offered a stunning vista of our neighbor's bay siding. When I was 10, I begged my mother to let us switch for just 1 year. "Please, Mom," I pleaded, "I just want to see the sun in the morning." She'd sighed, that long-suffering sound that was the soundtrack to my childhood, and patted my head. "Oh, Audrey, don't be so difficult. Beatrice is older. She needs the better space for her things." BA's things were piles of teen magazines and a collection of stuffed animals she was too old for. My things, my sketchpads, my charcoal pencils, my canvases, were relegated to a dusty corner of the basement, next to the water heater. As we grew, the disparities became impossible to ignore, sharp and painful landmarks of my youth. The year Beatrice went to her senior prom, it was an event on par with a royal wedding. I remember the entire month leading up to it was a whirlwind of catalogs and fabric swatches. My parents drove her 2 hours to a boutique in the city to have a silk dress custom fitted, a shimmering emerald green creation that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. They hired a professional photographer who posed her on the staircase for an hour, and a gleaming black limousine waited in the driveway. Watching her descend those stairs, a vision of effortless perfection, my parents looked at her with an expression of such profound pride, it was almost holy. It was the look an artist gives their finished masterpiece. 2 years later, it was my prom. I found a perfectly nice dress on the clearance rack at the mall. It was blue. It fit. When I showed my mom, she barely glanced up from her newspaper. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she'd murmured. The family budget, apparently so robust for Beatrice, had mysteriously evaporated. My dad took a few blurry photos of me and my date in the front yard with his old point-and-shoot camera, the flash making us both look pale and startled. Before we left, his only words were, "Don't be out too late." I didn't care about the dress. I didn't care about the limo. But that look in their eyes. I would have given anything for just 1 ounce of that awe, that feeling of being their masterpiece. It was a look I never received. I learned to adapt. I became the low-maintenance one, the reliable one, the fixer. I got straight A's, captained the art club, and won a state-level award for a portrait I painted. I remember calling my parents from the competition, my voice buzzing with excitement. "That's great, honey," my dad had said, his voice distracted. "Listen, we have to run. Beatrice has her final debate tournament this weekend, and we're helping her prepare." My award, my victory, was a footnote in the grand novel of Beatrice's accomplishments. I was the one who helped my dad organize his tax receipts, the one who picked up my mom's prescriptions, the one who ran to the store in the rain because Bea had forgotten to buy milk. I was the family's resident stagehand, making sure the lighting was perfect for the star of the show. So when it came time for my wedding to Calvin, I should have known better than to expect anything different. We kept it small, a simple ceremony at the courthouse followed by a lunch at our favorite local restaurant. We gave my parents the date 6 months in advance, begging them to keep the day clear. 3 weeks before the wedding, the inevitable call came. My mother's voice was syrupy sweet. "Audrey, honey, we have a tiny conflict. Beatrice's firm is throwing this huge, very important party to celebrate her promotion. It's a major networking opportunity for her, and it's on the same day as your thing. We simply can't miss it." My wedding. My one day. Was a thing. I felt that familiar cold knot tighten in my stomach. "Mom, can't you just come to the ceremony and then go to her party?" I asked, my voice small. "We'll try," she'd said, noncommittally. They did try. They showed up 10 minutes after the ceremony had started, slipping into the back row like strangers. I watched from the front as my father, in the middle of the officiant's speech, pulled back his cuff and checked his watch. The click of the metal clasp was as loud as a gunshot in the quiet room. At the restaurant, they stayed for exactly 45 minutes. They ate a piece of cake, posed for one stiff, smiling photograph, and then rushed off to toast Beatrice's success. That night, sitting beside my wonderful new husband, I felt a deep, hollow ache that no amount of champagne could fill. I had learned my place, over and over again. So when Beatrice announced her pregnancy, the celebration was entirely predictable, but the sheer scale of it still managed to steal my breath. The baby shower was an extravaganza that cost over $3,000. The nursery was a designer showroom, complete with a $5,000 crib. And the baby moon to a luxury resort in Florida was the cherry on top. My parents' retirement savings, the fund they had always described as precarious, suddenly became a bottomless well for their perfect daughter and her perfect grandchild. It was a $15,000 welcome party for a baby that hadn't even taken its first breath. And I stood by, smiling, congratulating, playing my part. I had made my peace with it, I told myself. I had accepted my role. I was wrong. The peace I thought I had was just exhaustion. And it was about to run out. My mother's voice on the other end of the line was a blade of pure panic, confirming every nightmare scenario my sleep-deprived brain had conjured. "Audrey! Thank God! You need to come over. Right away." "What's wrong?" I gasped, already out of bed and fumbling for a pair of jeans. My mind was a frantic slideshow of horrors: Beatrice in the hospital, the baby in distress, a car accident. "Is it Bea? Is the baby okay? Tell me what happened." There was a split second of hesitation on her end. She's fine," my mother said, her voice strained in a way I couldn't quite place. "The baby is fine. But there's a problem. A huge problem. I can't explain it over the phone, you just need to get over here. Now." Calvin sat up in bed, his face etched with concern. "What is it?" "I don't know," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "But it's an emergency." "After last night," he said, his voice low. "Audrey, be careful. But my ingrained conditioning, the 32 years of being the fixer, took over. My sister was in trouble. I had to go. The drive across town was a blur of traffic lights and worst-case scenarios. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would help, how I would put aside the raw, gaping wound from the night before and be the supportive sister they needed me to be. I burst through their front door without knocking, my purse clattering to the floor. The scene in the kitchen stopped me cold. My mother, my father, and Beatrice were all sitting at the kitchen table, a somber, silent trio. B.A.'s face was a mess of tear tracks and pale skin, her eyes swollen and red. My father stared grimly into a mug of coffee as if it held the answers to the universe. The air was thick and heavy, like the moments after a bomb has gone off. What happened? I asked again, my voice breathless. My mother looked up, her face a mask of tragedy. It's Trevor, she said, her voice trembling dramatically. He's left her. I rushed to my sister's side, a wave of genuine sympathy washing away the anger from the night before. This was awful. Oh, B, I said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. I am so sorry. What happened? She looked up at me, fresh tears welling in her eyes. It's worse than that, she whispered, her voice choked with sobs. He was having an affair, Audrey. 4 months. He's been stealing from our joint account to pay for his trashy girlfriend. Our savings, the college fund we started for the baby, it's all gone. He drained everything. My stomach dropped. This was a complete catastrophe. Divorce was devastating, but to be financially ruined on top of it, while pregnant and alone? It was unthinkable. That's horrible, I said, my mind reeling. What are you going to do? Is there anything I can do? My father finally looked up from his coffee. His eyes weren't filled with grief for his daughter's broken heart. They were filled with a cold, hard practicality that sent a chill down my spine. That's the issue, Audrey, he said, his voice flat. Here's the problem. We've invested a lot of money in this baby. The designer nursery, the shower, that trip to Florida, it was a significant financial outlay. I stared at him, my brain struggling to connect the dots. Where was this going? My mother jumped in, her voice suddenly shifting from panic to practical, as if she were discussing a business transaction. With Trevor gone and the accounts empty, Beatrice simply cannot afford this baby on her own. Her salary won't even cover the mortgage on that big house, let alone all the other expenses. And you know your father and I are on a fixed income. The room went silent again, but it was an expectant, predatory silence. They were all looking at me. And in that horrifying, crystal-clear moment, I understood the true nature of the emergency. They didn't call me because they needed a sister or a daughter. They called me because they needed a bank. We were wondering, my mother said, her voice now as smooth and placating as a loan officer's, since you and Calvin are so financially responsible, and you're having a baby too. We thought it would only make sense for you to take some of the bigger nursery items off BA's hands. And perhaps, you could help her out with some of her monthly expenses. Just for a while. Just until she gets back on her feet and we can figure out the divorce settlement. I just stared at her, speechless. It felt like I was in a bizarre play. Less than 12 hours ago, in this very house, they had laughed in my face. They had called my unborn child an inconvenience. They had told me to get out. And now, without a single word of apology, without a flicker of shame, they were asking me to finance the life of the very sister they had always, and so painfully, chosen over me. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. It was so audacious, so completely devoid of conscience, that for a long, dizzying moment, I thought I must have lost my mind. I got in my car, but I didn't start it right away. I just sat there in their driveway, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, the sheer nerve of their request echoing in my head. They hadn't just insulted me. They hadn't just dismissed my child. They expected me to pay for the privilege. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you can imagine. Just comment the number 1 and then listen to what I decided to do next. The drive home was a blur of red lights and disbelief. When I walked through the door, Calvin took one look at my face and knew. I sank onto our worn-out sofa and recounted the entire conversation, not with tears, but with a strange, chilling calm. Each word I spoke felt like a brick I was laying, building a wall between myself and the family I had spent my entire life trying to please. Calvin listened, his jaw tightening until a muscle pulsed in his cheek. When I finished, he didn't say, "I told you so." He just came and sat beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "So," he said, his voice a low growl of controlled anger, "last night, you were trash they were kicking out the door. Today, because their golden goose's nest egg is gone, they want you to be the new goose. They want our money, Audrey. The money we've been saving for our baby's college fund, for our future, to clean up a mess they happily financed when it was fun and glamorous." Hearing him lay it out so starkly, so brutally, was like a final, clarifying blow. The last remnants of obligation, of daughterly duty, crumbled to dust. For 32 years, I had been operating under the delusion that if I were just good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, they would finally see me. I finally understood that they had always seen me, perfectly. They saw me as a utility. A spare part. A safety net to be stored away until their prized possession needed it. "What are you thinking?" Calvin asked gently, his voice pulling me back from the edge. I looked at him, my husband, the man who saw all of me, not just the useful parts. I thought about our baby, our sweet, innocent baby, and the kind of world I wanted to bring them into. It wouldn't be a world where love was conditional, where their worth was measured against someone else's. The decision wasn't even a decision anymore. It was an awakening. "I'm thinking I'm done," I said, and the words felt like the truest thing I had ever spoken. I'm done auditioning for a role I was never going to get. I'm done being their backup plan. I'm done. The next morning, I picked up the phone. My hand was steady. My voice was even. "I've thought about your request," I told my mother. "I have my answer. I need to speak with all of you together. I'll be over in an hour." The air in their living room was thick with nervous expectation when I arrived. My parents and Beatrice sat on the sofa like a panel of judges, their expressions a mixture of hope and anxiety. My Aunt Lorraine, my mother's sister who was still visiting from out of state, sat in an armchair by the window, her knitting needles silent in her lap. She had witnessed my humiliation the other night, and she gave me a look of deep concern as I walked in. I didn't take the seat they offered me. I stood in the center of the room, on the very rug where my heart had been broken just 2 days before. "I've made some decisions," I began, my voice clear and unwavering. They all leaned forward, a barely perceptible motion. "First," I said, locking eyes with my parents, "the answer to your request is no. I will not be helping Beatrice financially. I will not be taking any of her second-hand baby things. My child is not an afterthought, and I will not furnish their life with the cast-offs from yours. The consequences of Beatrice's divorce are hers and Trevor's to manage. You chose to invest in her life, you can continue to do so. My family's finances are reserved for my family." My mother's face crumpled. "Audrey, you don't understand, this is family helping family." "Let me finish," I said, and the authority in my own voice was a shock even to me. I held up a hand, and she fell silent. For 32 years, I have lived in this family as a second-class citizen. I have watched you celebrate Beatrice's every breath while I have had to fight for every scrap of attention. I was the responsible one when you needed a problem solved, and the dramatic one when I had a problem of my own. I let my gaze sweep over each of them. On Sunday, you didn't just hurt my feelings. You revealed your true ones. When I told you I was carrying your grandchild, you sighed as if I'd announced a leaky faucet. You laughed when my own sister accused me of the most cynical, hurtful thing imaginable. And then you threw me out of your house. It was a misunderstanding, my father blustered, his face turning red. No, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but carrying more weight than any shout. It was the most honest moment we've ever had. You showed me exactly where I stand. You showed me where my child stands. And I believe you. Finally, I turned to Beatrice. She was staring at her hands, trying to look small and victimized. And you, I said. You smiled that little smirk of yours while I was falling apart. You've spent a lifetime enjoying the view from the pedestal they put you on, kicking down at me to make sure I never got too close. The act is over, B. I took a deep breath, the finality of it all washing over me. So, my second decision is this. I am going no contact. With all of you. It's over. Don't call. Don't text. Don't come to my home. When my baby is born, you will not be a part of their life. You've made it perfectly clear you don't want another baby, so I am relieving you of the burden. The room exploded. You can't be serious, my mother shrieked. After everything we've done for you, my father yelled. But a clear, firm voice cut through the chaos. She is absolutely right. We all froze, turning to look at Aunt Lorraine. She was on her feet now, her face a mask of cold fury. I have kept my mouth shut for 30 years, she said, her voice shaking with long-suppressed rage, her words directed at my mother and father. I have watched you systematically build one daughter up by tearing the other one down. What you did to Audrey on Sunday was cruel and unforgivable. And what you asked of her yesterday was monstrous. She walked over and stood by my side, a small, fierce soldier joining my one-woman army. She placed a hand on my shoulder. I am proud of you for finally drawing the line, she said to me. Then she looked back at my stunned family. And just so we're clear, I'll be staying with her in Calvin for the rest of my visit. I'd like to be with the part of the family that still knows what the word means. Together, my aunt and I walked to the door. Behind us, the chaos continued, my mother's sobs, my father's bellows about my ingratitude. But for the first time in my life, the noise didn't penetrate. It was just sound, meaningless and distant. I walked out of that house and into the crisp autumn air, and I felt a profound, exhilarating lightness. I was finally free. That exhilarating feeling of freedom, of a chain finally broken, lasted for about a week. It was a beautiful, peaceful week. Calvin and I started painting the small spare room in our apartment a soft, sunny yellow. We bought a crib, not a designer one, but a simple, sturdy one that we built together, laughing as we fumbled with the instructions. For the first time, my pregnancy felt like a joyous secret that belonged only to us. Then, the siege began. My decision to go no contact was not accepted as a boundary, it was interpreted as a declaration of war. My phone, which I had foolishly forgotten to block, became a weapon used against me. My mother would leave long, rambling voicemails that swung wildly between tearful pleading and vicious accusations. How could you do this to your family? After all the sacrifices we made for you, she'd wail, conveniently forgetting that most of those sacrifices were for Beatrice. My father would send curt, commanding texts, this foolishness has gone on long enough. You will call your mother. Beatrice, in a stunning display of victimhood, sent messages detailing how my cruelty was causing her undue stress during her delicate condition. I finally changed my number, a move that felt both liberating and deeply sad. But they were just getting started. When they could no longer reach me directly, they unleashed the flying monkeys. It's a term my therapist later taught me, for the people a narcissist recruits to do their bidding. The calls started coming into Calvin's phone, and then to my work. Distant cousins I hadn't seen since the last family funeral called to lecture me on forgiveness. My mother's friends from her church would ambush me in the produce aisle of the grocery store, their faces arranged in masks of deep concern. Your mother is just worried sick, dear, one of them, a woman named Carol, told me as I was trying to pick out avocados. You know, the Bible says to honor thy father and mother. They had all been fed the same carefully crafted story. Audrey, the ever-dramatic one, had a selfish tantrum and was now cruelly withholding a grandchild to punish her poor, heartbroken family. The constant barrage began to wear me down. I stopped going to my usual grocery store. I started screening all my calls. I felt like a fugitive in my own life. The stress was a constant, sour taste in my mouth. I had trouble sleeping, my nights filled with anxious dreams. At a routine prenatal checkup, my doctor's friendly smile faltered as she took my blood pressure. "It's a bit high, Audrey," she said, her brow furrowed with concern. "Is everything okay? Are you under a lot of stress?" I burst into tears right there on the examination table. Calvin was a rock, but I could see the toll it was taking on him, too. He was angry, fiercely protective, and felt helpless. He installed a new deadbolt and security cameras around our small apartment. "This is harassment, Audrey," he said one night, his voice tight. "We should get a lawyer, get a restraining order." I hesitated. It felt like such an extreme, irreversible step. A small, deeply conditioned part of me still flinched at the idea of airing my family's dirty laundry in a courtroom. My hesitation was a mistake. It was a signal that I was still willing to absorb a certain level of abuse, and my sister, Beatrice, took that as an invitation to escalate. The final, unforgivable line was crossed on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk at the small insurance firm where I'd worked for 5 years, trying to finalize a complicated claim. My phone buzzed with an internal message from my boss, Ms. Davis. "Audrey, can you come to my office when you have a moment, please?" Her tone was formal, and a knot of dread instantly formed in my stomach. I walked into her office, my heart thudding. She gestured for me to sit down, her expression unreadable. "I received an email an hour ago," she said, her voice neutral. It was sent from an anonymous, encrypted address. "It's regarding you." She turned her monitor towards me, and I felt the blood drain from my face. The email was a masterpiece of malicious prose. It was written in cold, corporate language, framing itself as a concerned report from a supposed colleague. It spoke of my increasingly erratic behavior and emotional instability. It fabricated stories about me taking long, tearful personal calls at my desk and missing deadlines due to overwhelming personal drama. It questioned my ability to handle the responsibilities of my job, especially with the added stress of an impending maternity leave. It ended with a chilling sentence: "While we are all sympathetic to personal issues, the integrity of our client files and the stability of our work environment must be the top priority." It was Beatrice. It had to be. The phrasing, the passive-aggressive poison disguised as concern, it was her signature. She wasn't just trying to hurt me anymore. She was trying to destroy me. She was trying to get me fired, to strip me of my salary, my independence, and my health insurance while I was 4 months pregnant. It was an act of such calculated evil that I couldn't breathe. I stammered, my hands shaking so badly I had to clench them in my lap. "This is a lie. Every word of it is a lie. I'm dealing with a very difficult family situation, and they are harassing me." Ms. Davis, a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes, looked at me for a long, silent moment. I felt my entire career, my entire future, hanging in the balance. Then, she did something that I will be grateful for until the day I die. She took her mouse, moved the cursor over the email, and with a firm click, dragged it into the trash folder. "Audrey," she said, her voice softening with an unexpected kindness. "I have been your supervisor for 5 years. You are one of the most dedicated and professional employees I have ever managed. I know your work ethic. I also know what a baseless, cowardly attack looks like." She leaned forward, her eyes locking with mine. "You don't have to tell me the details, but whoever is doing this is playing a very dangerous game. You and your husband need to take this seriously. This has gone far beyond a family spat. You need to protect yourself, legally." I walked out of her office in a daze, my body trembling with a mixture of profound gratitude for her trust and bone-deep terror at what my sister was willing to do. That night, I told Calvin everything. The last shred of hesitation, of misplaced family loyalty, vanished from his face, replaced by a cold, hard fury. "That's it," he said, his voice quiet but absolutely final. "This is over. This isn't just drama anymore. This is a targeted, malicious campaign. She tried to take away our ability to provide for our child. We are not waiting for her next move. We are going to find out exactly what is going on, and we are going to end this for good." He was right. The time for defense was over. It was time to unearth the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Calvin, my calm, methodical husband, transformed that night. The anger didn't make him loud, it made him focused. He said that to fight a liar as skilled as Beatrice, you needed one thing: undeniable, irrefutable truth. And the only person who held the other half of that truth was Trevor. The problem was, Trevor had seemingly dropped off the face of the earth. My parents claimed he had just packed a bag and vanished, leaving no trace. "People don't just vanish," Calvin said, his fingers already flying across his keyboard. He wasn't a private investigator, but he was meticulous and brilliant with data. He spent 2 full nights digging, falling down rabbit holes of public records, social media caches, and online databases. He hit dead ends, followed false leads. On the 3rd night, just after 2 a.m., I was woken up by the quiet click of his mouse. I went into the living room to find him staring at the screen, a single address glowing in the dim light. "I found him," he said, his voice tired but triumphant. "He's renting a cheap, month-to-month apartment on the other side of town. He's working a temp job at a warehouse. He's not running, he's hiding." The next day, I called the number Calvin had found. When a man's weary voice answered, I said, my own voice shaking slightly, "Trevor? It's Audrey. We need to talk. It's about Beatrice." There was a long silence, and then a heavy sigh. "Diner off the highway. 1 hour," he said, and hung up. The diner was a relic from another era, with cracked red vinyl booths and the smell of stale coffee in the air. The man who slid into the booth across from us looked like a hollowed-out version of the confident man I'd known. He was gaunt, his eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, and he looked like he hadn't had a decent night's sleep in months. "What do you want, Audrey?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the salt shaker. "The truth," I said simply. I laid it all out for him. The dinner. The no-contact decision. The flying monkeys. The constant, suffocating harassment. And then I told him about the email to my job. As I spoke about the attack on my career, something in his posture shifted. The exhaustion in his eyes was slowly burned away by a flicker of familiar anger. He finally looked up and met my eyes. "She went after your job," he whispered, a note of disbelief in his voice. "Of course, she did. Her scorched earth policy." He took a long, shaky breath and ran a hand through his hair. "You have to understand," he said, his voice low and urgent. "This story she's telling everyone, about me having an affair, about me stealing all the money, it is a complete and total lie. Every single word of it." Calvin leaned forward, his expression intense. "What do you mean, Trevor?" "I never had an affair," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I loved her. I was trying to make it work, even when she was becoming impossible. She's the one who's been planning this for months. She wanted out of the marriage, but she didn't want a fair divorce settlement. She wanted to be the victim. She wanted everything. Sympathy, your parents' money, the house, everything." He slid a thick, worn envelope across the sticky tabletop. "She's the one who was moving money. For 6 months, she was systematically transferring funds from our joint accounts into a private one she opened without my knowledge. I found out by accident. When I confronted her, she turned it all around on me. I have the bank statements to prove it." Calvin opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of printed pages, showing transfer after transfer, all authorized by Beatrice. I felt a wave of dizziness. It was premeditated. It was fraud. But that's not the real reason, Trevor said, his voice dropping so low I had to lean in to hear him. That's not the root of it. There's a reason your parents treat you the way they do. A reason Beatrice has always been able to control them. He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a deep, unexpected pity. Audrey. I wasn't supposed to hear. I came home early one night, and they were in the kitchen, arguing. Bea and your mom. Bea was furious about something, and she said, "You have to keep supporting me. I'm the only real one you've got." And your mom just shushed her, terrified. She said, "Don't you ever say that out loud. Your father could never handle it if the truth came out." The truth about what? I whispered, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Trevor took a deep breath. The truth that you are not your father's biological daughter. The diner disappeared. The sounds, the smells, the people, it all dissolved into a dull, roaring static in my ears. I felt Calvin's hand find mine under the table, his grip a grounding force in my spinning world. "What did you say?" I breathed. "Your mother had an affair, a long time ago," Trevor said, his voice gentle. "Your father found out when you were just a toddler. They decided to stay together for appearances, but he's never been able to look at you the same way. And your mother has spent your entire life trying to make it up to him, overcompensating by spoiling Beatrice, his real daughter, to keep the peace. Beatrice has known for years. She sees it as her birthright. She thinks she deserves everything she gets because, in her mind, you're an imposter." It was a key turning in a lock I never knew existed. Suddenly, my entire life, every confusing slight, every forgotten birthday, every time I felt like a ghost in my own home, it all snapped into place with a horrifying, nauseating clarity. I wasn't difficult. I wasn't dramatic. I was a living, breathing reminder of a secret they had buried 30 years ago. "There's one more thing," Trevor said, pulling out his phone. His face was grim. When I realized what she was doing, that she was building a case against me, I started recording some of our conversations. To protect myself. He scrolled through his files and pressed play. Beatrice's voice, my sister's voice, filled the small space in our booth. It was bright, chirpy, and utterly chilling. She was on the phone with a friend, bragging. And the best part is, poor little Audrey actually thinks they might start treating her equally now that she's pregnant, my sister's voice sang, followed by a peal of her friend's laughter. She is so pathetic. She has no idea she's not even Dad's real daughter. By the time I'm done, she'll be completely cut off, and I'll have everything I'm owed. It's the perfect inheritance plan, really. She gets nothing, and I get everything." He stopped the recording. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just favoritism. It wasn't just sibling rivalry. It was a calculated, long-term conspiracy to erase me from my own family. I looked at the broken man across from me, a man whose life my sister had also tried to methodically destroy, and I finally understood. This was never a family squabble. This was a war. And I had just been handed the map to the entire battlefield. We walked out of that diner into the harsh afternoon sun, the envelope of bank statements feeling as heavy as a tombstone in my hands. For the rest of the day, I was in a state of shock, adrift in the wreckage of my own life story. The knowledge about my paternity was a deep, personal wound, a grief for a father I never had and a man I could never truly reach. But the recording of my sister's voice, that cold, calculating glee, was something else entirely. It was a weapon. And I knew it was time to use it. Trevor, armed with his evidence and a newfound determination to clear his name, was the one who pulled the trigger. He didn't want revenge, he wanted justice. His lawyer sent a formal letter to my parents, requesting a meeting to discuss the financial and personal fraud perpetrated by their daughter, Beatrice. I wasn't there for the meeting, but Trevor told me everything afterward. He said he simply walked into their pristine living room, sat my parents down, and calmly presented the evidence. He didn't raise his voice. He just laid the bank statements out on the coffee table, a paper trail of Beatrice's deception. He showed them the timeline of her secret transfers, proving that she had been planning her exit for months, long before she claimed Trevor had wronged her. And then, he placed his phone on the table and pressed play. He said you could have heard a pin drop in the room as Beatrice's cheerful, sociopathic voice filled the space, detailing her perfect inheritance plan. He said my mother's face went a ghostly white, and she put a hand to her mouth as if she were going to be sick. He said my father just stared at the phone, his face, for the first time, showing not anger or disappointment, but a look of utter, devastating betrayal. The golden child he had spent a lifetime protecting and pedestalizing was a fraud. The monster in the story wasn't the outsider, it was his own. When they confronted Beatrice with the undeniable proof, she didn't confess. She didn't apologize. She shattered. The intricate web of lies she had so carefully constructed was her entire reality, and without it, she had nothing. She fell apart completely, screaming, crying, and finally, making threats to harm herself. She was hospitalized for a full psychiatric evaluation. The house of cards had collapsed in the most spectacular way imaginable. And then, my phone began to ring. And ring. And ring. It was my parents. The voicemails were a desperate, chaotic symphony of regret. My mother's sobbing apologies. My father's gravelly, broken voice saying, "We were wrong, Audrey. We were so wrong. Please, just let us talk to you." They were sorry. They didn't know. They had been manipulated. They loved me. They begged me, pleaded with me, to let them be grandparents to my baby, to let them somehow fix the unfixable. But I didn't answer a single call. It was too late. Their apologies were not for the 32 years they had treated me as less than. They were for the embarrassment of being fooled by the daughter they had chosen over me. The truth didn't erase a lifetime of pain, it just gave it a name. And I had no desire to help them pick up the pieces of a family that had never truly included me in the first place. I was too busy building my own. 3 weeks later, in the quiet, sterile calm of a hospital room, I went into labor. There was no family drama in the waiting room. There were no tense phone calls. There was just me and Calvin, a team. He held my hand through every contraction, he breathed with me, he was my rock. And then, after hours of work, she was here. A beautiful, healthy baby girl, with a shock of dark hair and my husband's calm, wise eyes. We named her Daisy May. The moment they placed her on my chest, my entire world, which had been violently thrown off its axis, suddenly settled. Holding her, smelling her sweet, newborn scent, I felt a love so fierce and so pure it was like a physical force. All the anger, all the hurt, all the toxic, tangled mess of my family, it all just dissolved. It didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was this tiny, perfect person in my arms. This was my family now. The gifts started arriving the day we brought her home. It was an avalanche. Dozens of boxes from the most expensive baby boutiques in the city. A ridiculously fancy stroller, a crib that probably cost more than my car, piles of designer clothes. Each package came with a long, handwritten card from my parents, filled with desperate, pleading words. Calvin would haul the boxes inside, his face set like stone. We didn't open a single one. Every Saturday, he would load them into the back of our car, and we would drive them to a local women's shelter. I loved the image of a struggling new mother getting to use a brand new, top-of-the-line stroller, a gift given not with the sour taint of guilt, but with a sense of hope. The only family member I invited to meet Daisy was Aunt Lorraine. The moment she held her, she burst into tears. "Oh, Audrey," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "She's just perfect. You did it. You broke the cycle. She had become my mother in every way that counted, a wellspring of unconditional love and support. It was all the family I needed. It's been 2 years now. Our little apartment, once a quiet refuge, is now a joyful, chaotic whirlwind of a toddler's energy. Daisy is a force of nature, a bubbly, bright little girl with a mischievous grin who has just started stringing sentences together. Her favorite is more cookies, please. Our walls are covered in her crayon masterpieces, and there are building blocks in every corner. It's a happy home. It's a peaceful home. It's everything I never had. Beatrice was eventually released from care after several months. She was diagnosed with a cluster of personality disorders. Through Aunt Lorraine, I heard that she is in intensive therapy. She wrote me a long, 12-page letter of apology 6 months ago. I read it, acknowledged the words on the page, and then I filed it away in a box in the back of my closet. Some apologies are for the person giving them, not the person receiving them. Maybe one day, for my own peace of mind, I'll find it in my heart to truly forgive her. But I have learned that forgiveness and reconciliation are two very different things. Forgiving is for me. Reconciliation would be for her, and that is a bridge I am not yet, and may never be, willing to cross. My parents still try. They send cards on birthdays and holidays, always signed, with all our love and deepest regrets. They send generous checks for Daisy's college fund on the 1st of every month. Calvin deposits them into an account for her, and we never speak of it. I don't hate them. In a strange way, I almost pity them. They are two lonely people who made a terrible mistake 30 years ago and then spent a lifetime trying to bury it, only to have it explode and take their entire world with it. They are truly sorry, I believe that. But I've learned a hard lesson: being sorry and being trustworthy are not the same thing. The pattern of their behavior, the foundation of their family, was built on a lie. They didn't just favor Beatrice, they used her as a shield against a truth they couldn't face. And they used me as the sacrifice to keep that shield polished. True healing, I've found, didn't come from their downfall or their apologies. It came quietly, in the small moments of my new life. It came from watching Calvin patiently teach Daisy how to stack her blocks. It came from Aunt Lorraine reading her bedtime stories, her voice soft and loving. It came from the profound peace of knowing that my daughter will grow up in a home where love isn't a competition, where she is celebrated for exactly who she is, not for who she isn't. I am breaking the cycle. That is my victory. That is my revenge. The little girl who used to stare out at a brick wall, dreaming of a little sunshine, grew up and learned to build her own house, with windows on every side. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it. If any part of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone learning to set boundaries with their family? Your wisdom could help someone else who is going through a tough time. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know.